The eternity's flame cast a long shadow over Earth, its massive form blotting out the stars. From the observation deck, the planet looked serene, a fragile sphere of blue and green cradled in the void. High Sovereign Veyara D'Neir studied, the sight with a mixture of fascination and frustration. The Zhyri Dominion spanned half the known galaxy, yet this insignificant world had defied them at every turn. Curious, isn't it? She mused aloud. Such a simple world, yet so persistent. Her chief advisor, Zalath, stood beside her, his 6 limbs clasped neatly in front of his elongated torso. Perhaps that is their strength, High Sovereign. Simplicity breeds unpredictability. Veyara's glowing silver eyes flicked toward him. Unpredictability is not a strength, it's chaos. And chaos is something we must stamp out. Zalath inclined his head. Of course, yet if I may suggest, chaos often requires unconventional methods to contain. Before Veyara could respond, a chime interrupted them. Zalath turned to the control panel embedded in the wall and pressed a glowing sigil. The human envoy has arrived. Bring him in, Veyara commanded, her voice as cold and unyielding as the steel beneath her feet. The doors hissed open, revealing a lone figure flanked by 2 Dominion guards. He walked with purpose, his step steady despite the imposing surroundings. Veyara observed him with interest. His clothing was simple, a dark jacket over a plain shirt and sturdy boots, but his demeanor spoke of confidence. The guard stepped aside as he stopped in the center of the chamber, his dark eyes meeting Veyara's glowing gaze. He was tall. For a human, his frame lean but strong. His face bore faint scars, remnants of a hard life perhaps, or battles fought on Earth's behalf. I am Tarian Solis, he said, his voice steady, representative of Earth. Veyara descended from her elevated platform, her presence as commanding as the gravity wells of black holes. The silver strands of her hair caught the light as she moved, and her armored cloak shimmered faintly with every step. Tarian Solis, she repeated, her tone carefully neutral. You are bold to come here to face me alone. Do you speak for your entire planet? I speak for those who value freedom, he replied, his voice firm, and for those who believe coexistence is possible. Her lips curved into a faint smile. Coexistence, an amusing notion. You do realize that Earth's resistance has been little more than an irritation to the Dominion, don't you? Tarian didn't flinch. If that were true, we wouldn't be having this conversation. The room fell silent. Veyara's court, a gathering of advisors and high-ranking officials, watched the exchange with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Humans were considered primitive after all, hardly worth the sovereign's time. Yet this one had managed to secure an audience with her. You tread a dangerous line, human, Veyara said, her voice low. Do you truly believe Earth can defy the Dominion forever? Tarian held her gaze. No empire lasts forever. Not even yours. A ripple of tension passed through the room. Zalath's many eyes darted toward Veyara, who remained still, her expression unreadable. You speak with great confidence for someone representing a doomed planet, she said at last. What makes you think Earth has anything to offer the Dominion? Tarian took a step forward, undeterred by the oppressive atmosphere. Because Earth is unlike any other world you've conquered. We adapt, we innovate, and we don't give up, no matter the odds. Veyara studied him, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. There was something intriguing about his defiance, an unyielding spirit that reminded her of the warriors of old. You speak of innovation, she said, her tone sharp. Yet your planet remains technologically inferior. What could Earth possibly contribute to an empire that spans half the galaxy? Our ingenuity, Tarian replied without hesitation. We've achieved feats with limited resources that rival the accomplishments of more advanced civilizations. Renewable energy, agricultural efficiency, medical breakthroughs. These are just a few examples of what humanity has to offer. And you expect me to believe you would share these advancements freely? Not freely, he admitted. In exchange for Earth sovereignty, a murmur rippled through the court. Veyara raised a hand, silencing the room. Bold words, she said, descending the final steps to stand directly before him. But words alone will not save your planet. What assurance do I have that Earth will honor such an agreement? Tarian straightened, his dark eyes unwavering. You have my word, and if that's not enough, I'll remain here as a liaison to ensure the terms are upheld. Her gaze swept over him, assessing, calculating. A liaison, she repeated. You would give up your freedom to protect your world? If that's what it takes, he said simply. For a long moment, neither spoke. The tension in the room was palpable, the air heavy with unspoken challenges. Finally, Veyara stepped back, a faint smile playing on her lips. You amuse me, Tarian Solis, she said, returning to her throne. Very well. I will consider your proposal, but make no mistake. If Earth betrays me, your planet will burn. Tarian inclined his head, the faintest hint of a smile on his lips. I wouldn't expect anything less. As the guards escorted him out, Veyara watched him go, her thoughts a whirlwind of curiosity and intrigue. Tarian Solis was unlike any human she had encountered, bold, unyielding, and strangely captivating. High Sovereign, Zalath said cautiously. Do you believe he speaks the truth? Veyara's lips twitched into a small, enigmatic smile. Truth or not, he has given me much to consider. Perhaps Earth is worth more than we thought. The corridors of the Eternity's flame were a stark contrast to Earth's rustic charm. Polished metal walls pulsed faintly with bioluminescent veins, casting a silvery glow that made the ship feel alive. Tarian Solis walked through the vast hallways, flanked by Dominion guards whose insectile frames clicked faintly with every step. Though outwardly composed, Tarian's mind raced. The meeting with the High Sovereign had gone better than expected. Veyara D'Neir wasn't just powerful. She was intelligent, sharp, and most importantly, intrigued. That intrigue was his leverage, but it was also dangerous. The guards stopped. Before a large chamber, one of them pressed a clawed hand to the door's control panel and the metal slid open with a soft hiss. Enter, the guard said, its voice a guttural growl. Tarian stepped inside, the doors closing behind him. The room was expansive yet sparsely furnished. A table, a few chairs, and a viewport that offered a breathtaking view of Earth below. At the far end of the table stood Zalath, his multi-limbed form as unnerving as ever. Representative Solis, Zalath said, his voice smooth and precise. The High Sovereign has authorized this negotiation. However, I will oversee all proceedings to ensure they align with Dominion interests. Of course, Tarian replied, his tone measured. I wouldn't expect anything less. Zalath gestured to the table. Sit. Let us begin. As Tarian took his seat, he couldn't help but notice the faint tension in Zalath's movements. The advisor's many eyes flickered toward the door, as though anticipating someone else's arrival. Moments later, the door opened again, and Veyara entered. Her presence filled the room instantly, her silver hair cascading like liquid metal, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Tarian rose to his feet instinctively, a small gesture of respect he hadn't intended. High Sovereign, Zalath began, but Veyara silenced him with a glance. Let us dispense with formalities, she said, her voice smooth yet commanding. I wish to hear from the human. Tarian suppressed a smirk. I'm honored, High Sovereign. She raised an eyebrow. Flattery will not aid your cause, Tarian Solis. Speak plainly. Very well, he said, sitting back down. Earth proposes a partnership, not subjugation. We retain our sovereignty, and in return, we provide resources and advancements that benefit both our planet and the Dominion. And you believe such an arrangement will satisfy my people? I believe. It's a start, Tarian said. The Dominion thrives on expansion, yes, but not all victories require annihilation. A symbiotic relationship could prove more profitable than war. Veyara regarded him silently, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to Zalath. Your thoughts, High Sovereign, Zalath said carefully. While the human's proposal is unorthodox, there is merit to his argument. Earth's resources and ingenuity could indeed bolster the Dominion's influence. Veyara's gaze returned to Tarian. "And what of your resistance movements? How do you propose to quell them?" Tarian hesitated. This was the delicate part. Resistance stems from fear and mistrust. If the Dominion demonstrates a willingness to cooperate, much of that hostility will diminish. And if it doesn't? "Then you'll have me as collateral," Tarian said, his voice steady. The room fell silent. Veyara's eyes narrowed, the faintest hint of a smile playing on her lips. "You place great value on your own life, Tarian Solis, no more than I value the lives of my people." For a moment, Veyara said nothing. Then she leaned back in her chair, her gaze piercing. "You are either a fool or a very clever man, Tarian Solis. Perhaps both." The negotiations continued. For hours, delving into the minutiae of resource exchanges, technological sharing, and cultural preservation. Tarian held his ground, countering every Dominion demand with measured compromises. As the sun dipped below the horizon on Earth, casting the planet in shades of twilight, the meeting adjourned. Tarian felt the weight of exhaustion pressing down on him, but he couldn't afford to show it. "You may return to your quarters," Zalath said, his tone curt. "The High Sovereign and I will deliberate further." Tarian nodded, rising from his seat. But as he turned to leave, Veyara's voice stopped him. "Tarian Solis." He looked back at her, surprised to see a faint softness in her expression. "You have given me much to consider," she said. "Rest well." He inclined his head. "Thank you, High Sovereign." As he left the chamber, Tarian couldn't shake. The feeling that the game he was playing was far more dangerous than he'd anticipated. In her private quarters, Veyara stood before a large, transparent wall that overlooked the stars. The negotiations had been intriguing, but what fascinated her most was the human himself. "Tarian Solis," she murmured, the name rolling off her tongue. Zalath entered quietly, his movements almost silent. "High Sovereign, do you truly believe this human can be trusted?" Veyara turned to him, her silver eyes thoughtful. "Trust is irrelevant, Zalath. What matters is potential, and Tarian Solis has it in abundance." "Potential for what?" She smiled faintly. "That remains to be seen." Tarian's quarters were small but functional. As he sat on the edge of the bed, staring out at the stars, his thoughts were a whirlwind of strategy and uncertainty. He'd taken a monumental risk coming aboard the Eternity's Flame, but it was a risk worth taking. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. The door slid open, revealing a young Zhyri attendant carrying a tray of food. "Representative Solis," she said, her voice melodic. "Your evening meal." "Thank you," he said, taking the tray. As the door closed behind her, Tarian sighed. The food was unfamiliar, a mix of vibrant colors and textures, but he ate without complaint. Survival required adaptability, and he couldn't afford to falter now. His thoughts drifted back to Veyara. She was unlike anyone he'd ever met, intelligent, commanding, and undeniably captivating. But she was also dangerous, and Tarian knew better than to let his guard down. Still, he couldn't ignore the strange pull he felt toward her. It wasn't just her beauty, though. That was undeniable. It was something deeper, an unspoken connection that defied logic. As he finished his meal and lay back on the bed, Tarian stared up at the ceiling, the glow of the living metal casting faint patterns across his skin. The game was far from over, and the stakes were higher than ever. Tarian stood before the vast viewport in his quarters, Earth's luminous sphere casting a faint blue hue across the polished walls. Every decision he had made to reach this point weighed heavily on his shoulders. The High Sovereign had granted him an audience, entertained his proposals, and allowed him a place on her ship. But Tarian wasn't naive. The Dominion's interests were all that mattered to them. His task wasn't over, it had just begun. The soft hiss of the door opening startled him. Turning, he found himself facing an unexpected visitor. Veyara stood there, her presence as commanding as ever. Her silver hair shimmered in the soft light, and her glowing eyes carried a mix of curiosity and challenge. "You should rest, Tarian Solis," she said, stepping into the room. Hard to rest when you're negotiating your planets. Survival, he replied. She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. A fair point. Yet you must know that exhaustion clouds judgment. Even the sharpest mind falters under strain. He crossed his arms, meeting her gaze. Is that why you're here? To offer me advice? Veyara smiled faintly, the gesture, both disarming and unsettling. In a way, I find you perplexing. Most species crumble under the Dominion's rule, yet humans resist. Why? Tarian didn't hesitate. Because freedom is worth fighting for. It's something no one, no matter how powerful, has the right to take. Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of something unreadable passing across her face. Freedom is an illusion. Order is what ensures survival. Order imposed by fear isn't survival, it's stagnation, he countered. Humanity thrives because we're free to question, to innovate, to dream. Without that, we're nothing. Veyara studied him, her expression softening slightly. You speak with conviction, but words are easy, Tarian Solis. Prove to me that humanity's defiance is more than a fleeting spark. The next day, Tarian was summoned to the Dominion's training arena, a massive chamber filled with advanced equipment and Zhyri warriors honing their combat skills. The room buzzed with energy, the air thick with the sound of clashing weapons and the hum of technology. Veyara stood on a raised platform overlooking the arena, her presence commanding respect from everyone in the room. Tarian joined her, his expression wary. You called for me, he said. She gestured to the arena below. If your species values adaptability, as you claim, show me. He frowned. What do you mean? A demonstration, she said simply. Your people's strength against ours. Enter the arena and face one of my warriors. Tarian's eyes narrowed. You want me to fight? Unless you're afraid, she said, her tone teasing but her gaze serious. Tarian smirked. You'll regret underestimating me. He descended into the arena, his heart pounding. The Zhyri warriors were unlike anything he'd ever encountered, tall, agile, and equipped with weapons that seemed to hum with barely contained energy. His opponent stepped forward, a towering figure clad in sleek armor. The alien's weapon, a staff with glowing edges, crackled ominously as he spun it with practiced ease. Tarian glanced at the array of human-sized weapons provided in the arena. He chose a simple baton, its metallic surface cool under his grip. No energy fields, no advanced tech, just a weapon he could rely on. The fight began with a sharp crack of sound. Tarian moved swiftly, dodging the alien's initial strike. The Zhyri warrior was fast, his movements precise and calculated, but Tarian relied on his instincts and years of combat experience. The crowd watched intently as the human and alien clashed, their weapons colliding with sparks and echoes. Tarian's strategy became clear. He wasn't trying to overpower his opponent, but outthink him. He feigned weaknesses, baited attacks, and used the environment to his advantage. Finally, with a swift, decisive strike, Tarian disarmed the Zhyri warrior and brought him to the ground. The arena fell silent, save for the hum of energy dissipating from the fallen staff. Veyara's voice cut through the quiet. Impressive. Tarian offered his opponent a hand, helping him up before turning to face the High Sovereign. I told you, humanity adapts. Later that evening, Tarian found himself summoned to Veyara's private chambers. The room was nothing like he expected. It was warm, almost inviting, with soft lighting and intricate tapestries depicting star systems and battles long past. Veyara stood by a low table, pouring a shimmering liquid into 2 crystalline glasses. She gestured for him to join her. You've earned this, she said, handing him a glass. Tarian took a cautious sip. The drink was sweet and faintly spicy, warming him from the inside. What is it? A rare nectar from my homeworld, she replied. Consider it a gesture of goodwill. He studied her, noting the subtle tension in her posture. Why the sudden hospitality? She met his gaze, her glowing eyes softer than he'd ever seen. You've proven yourself, Tarian Solis. not just as a negotiator, but as a warrior. Few have earned my respect as you have." "Respect?" he echoed, raising an eyebrow. "From a high sovereign? I must be doing something right." She smiled faintly, her expression both amused and contemplative. "You're different, Tarian, unlike any human or any being I've encountered. Is that a compliment?" "An observation," she replied. "Tell me, do you truly believe peace is possible between our people?" Tarian hesitated. "I believe it's worth fighting for. Whether it's possible depends on us." Veyara's gaze lingered on him, and for a moment, the weight of her authority seemed to fade, leaving only the woman beneath. "You're a remarkable individual, Tarian Solis, but I wonder, are you prepared for what lies ahead?" He met her eyes, his voice steady. "I didn't come here to fail, Veyara." For the first time, she allowed herself to smile, a genuine, unguarded smile that hinted at the woman hidden beneath the sovereign's mask. As Tarian returned to his quarters that night, his thoughts were a whirlwind. Veyara was more than he'd expected, complex, intelligent, and strangely vulnerable. She wasn't just an enemy or an obstacle. She was a puzzle, and Tarian couldn't help but feel drawn to her. But the road ahead was treacherous. Trust was fragile, and one misstep could cost him everything. For now he would bide his time, learn her weaknesses, and find a way to secure Earth's future. Yet, as he lay in the darkness, staring up at the glowing patterns on the ceiling, one thought lingered in his mind. Veyara D'Neir was dangerous not just to Earth but to his heart. Tarian awoke to the sound of soft chimes echoing through his quarters, signaling the arrival of an envoy. Rising quickly, he adjusted his uniform and opened the door to find a slender Zhyri attendant with pale blue skin and golden markings that shimmered faintly in the light. "The High Sovereign requests your presence in the Central Observatory," the attendant said, her tone formal, but not unkind. Tarian nodded. "Lead the way." The journey to the Central Observatory took them through winding corridors, each one adorned with intricate murals depicting the Zhyri's conquests and achievements. Tarian couldn't help but feel the weight of history pressing down on him. These people weren't just conquerors, they were builders of empires, shapers of civilizations. And yet beneath their grandeur, he sensed an undercurrent of fear, a fear of losing control. When they arrived at the observatory, Tarian was struck by its beauty. The domed ceiling was transparent, offering an unobstructed view of the cosmos. Stars glittered like scattered diamonds, and Earth loomed large in the distance, its vibrant colors a stark contrast to the cold expanse of space. Veyara stood at the center of the room, her back to him. She wore a flowing robe of deep indigo, the fabric shimmering like liquid starlight. When she turned to face him, her expression was unreadable. "Tarian Solis," she said, her voice echoing softly in the vast chamber. "You've proven yourself, capable in the arena. Now I have a more delicate task for you." He approached her cautiously. "I'm listening." "There is unrest among my advisors," she began. "Some believe our negotiations with Earth are a sign of weakness. They see your presence here as an insult to our dominance." Tarian frowned. "And you brought me here to help quell their doubts?" "In a manner of speaking," she said. "I need you to accompany me to a gathering of the council. Your presence alone will be provocative, but your words may tip the scales." He crossed his arms. "You're asking me to stand before your council and argue for humanity's right to exist? Sounds risky." Veyara's gaze hardened. "Everything about this situation is risky, Tarian. But if you truly believe in the strength of your people, you'll rise to the challenge." He met her eyes, the intensity of her stare sending a shiver down his spine. "Fine," he said. "But if this goes south, don't expect me to go down quietly." A faint smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "I wouldn't expect anything less." The council chamber was a grand amphitheater, its tiered seating arranged in a perfect circle around a central platform. The air buzzed with tension as Veyara and Tarian entered, their steps echoing on the polished floor. The council members were a diverse group, their appearances reflecting the vast reaches of the Dominion. Some were humanoid, others distinctly alien, with forms and features that defied description. All of them turned their attention to the newcomers, their expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. Veyara stepped onto the central platform, her voice ringing out with authority. "Honored counselors, I present to you Tarian Solis, representative of Earth." A murmur rippled through the chamber, and Tarian felt the weight of 100 eyes on him. He resisted the urge to fidget, standing tall and meeting their gazes head-on. One of the counselors, a towering figure with iridescent scales and a deep, resonant voice, spoke first. "Why should we entertain the presence of this primitive? His kind has no place among us." Tarian bristled but kept his tone measured. "Primitive? That's an interesting choice of words coming from someone who's afraid of a species they claim to be superior to." The chamber fell silent, and for a moment, Tarian thought he'd overstepped. Then, to his surprise, a few counselors chuckled, softly, their amusement breaking the tension. Another counselor, a lithe insectoid being with multifaceted eyes, leaned forward. "You speak boldly, human, but boldness alone does not justify your existence." Tarian took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Humanity isn't asking for justification. We're asking for the chance to prove ourselves. You've seen what we're capable of, our resilience, our ingenuity. Give us the opportunity to stand as equals, and I guarantee we'll exceed your expectations." The insectoid counselor clicked their mandibles thoughtfully, while others whispered among themselves. Veyara watched silently, her expression unreadable. Finally, the scaled counselor spoke again. "You make a compelling argument, Tarian Solis. But words are not enough. The Dominion values action above all else." Tarian nodded. "Then give us the chance to act. Let us show you what humanity can do when we're not fighting to survive." The council deliberated for what felt like an eternity, their voices blending into an indistinct hum. Finally, the presiding counselor, a regal being with luminous wings, rose to address the chamber. "We will consider your proposal," they said, their tone neutral. "But know this, human. Should your people fail to prove their worth, there will be no second chances." As Tarian and Veyara left the chamber, he let out a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Well, that could have gone worse." Veyara glanced at him, a faint smile playing on her lips. "You handled yourself well. Better than I expected, if I'm being honest." "Was that a compliment?" he teased. "An observation," she replied, echoing his earlier words. They walked in silence for a while, the tension between them shifting into something more complex. Finally, Tarian spoke. "Why are you doing this, Veyara? You could crush Earth with a single command. Why bother with diplomacy?" She hesitated, her gaze distant. "Because I've seen what happens when we conquer without thought. Entire civilizations lost, their potential snuffed out like a dying star. The Dominion is powerful, but power without purpose is hollow." Tarian studied her, seeing the cracks in her armor, the doubt, the guilt. "You don't have to carry that burden alone," he said softly. Her eyes snapped to his, sharp and searching. For a moment it seemed as though she might brush off his words, but then to his surprise, she nodded. "Perhaps not," she said. Later, that night Veyara stood alone in her quarters, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. Tarian's words lingered in her mind, unsettling and yet strangely comforting. He was unlike anyone she had ever met, bold, defiant, and utterly unyielding. And despite herself, she found that she didn't want to see him fail. For the first time in centuries, Veyara D'Neir allowed herself to hope. The stars above Earth shimmered like distant embers, their light barely touching the chaos unfolding in orbit. The Dominion flagship loomed over the planet, its presence an unspoken threat, as smaller vessels darted through the void in tense, controlled maneuvers. But it wasn't the warships or the political tension that occupied Tarian Solis's mind. It was Veyara D'Neir. Standing beside him on the observation deck, her silhouette illuminated by the glow of Earth below, Veyara seemed as distant and untouchable as the stars, yet in the last few weeks he had seen cracks in her composure, glimpses of vulnerability that made her more than the High Sovereign of the Zhyri. They made her human, in a way that neither of them could fully understand. "You've been quiet," Tarian said, breaking the silence. Veyara turned her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "Much depends on what happens next." Tarian leaned against the railing, his tone casual but his words deliberate. "You mean whether your council decides to destroy Earth or not?" She didn't answer immediately, her gaze fixed on the planet. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "I mean whether I can convince them not to." The weight of her admission hit Tarian like a physical blow. He had known she was walking a fine line, balancing her loyalty to her people, with the growing connection between them. But hearing her say it aloud made it real in a way he wasn't prepared for. "Veyara," he said, stepping closer, "you don't have to do this alone." Her eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw something raw and unguarded in her gaze. "You don't understand, Tarian. My position, my power, it's all built on the trust of the Dominion. If I show weakness now, it could unravel everything. And if you destroy Earth?" He countered. "What does that gain you? Another scar on your soul? Another piece of your heart carved away?" She flinched, the words cutting deeper than he intended. But she didn't pull away. Instead, she reached for his hand, her touch, hesitant but deliberate. "What would you have me do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Choose humanity," he said. "Not just mine, yours too. Choose the part of you that believes in something more than power and control." The next day, the council convened in a final session to decide Earth's fate. Tarian stood beside Veyara on the central platform, the weight of 1,000 judgments bearing down on them. The presiding counselor, their luminous wings casting a golden glow over the chamber, spoke first. "High Sovereign Veyara D'Neir, you have brought this human before us to argue for his species' survival. Yet doubts remain. What do you say to those who question your judgment?" Veyara stepped forward, her voice steady but her hands clenched at her sides. "I say that survival is not a matter of conquest or control. It is a matter of resilience, of hope, of connection. Humanity embodies all these things. They are not a threat to the Dominion. They are a reminder of what we once aspired to be." The counselors murmured among themselves, but Tarian wasn't done. He stepped forward, his voice ringing out clear and firm. "You look at us and see weakness, but what you call weakness, we call strength. The ability to stand up after every fall, to find light in the darkest places. That's what makes us human, and it's what makes us worth saving." The chamber fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. The presiding counselor finally spoke. "Your words are compelling, but the Dominion requires more than sentiment. We require action." Veyara raised her chin, her gaze unwavering. "Then let my actions speak. I propose an alliance with Earth, not as conquerors, but as partners. Together, we can achieve more than either of us could alone." The council erupted into debate, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of opinions. But Tarian saw something shift in their expressions, a glimmer of possibility, a crack in their resolve. Hours later, the decision was announced. The Dominion would not destroy Earth. Instead, they would establish a partnership, with Veyara leading the initiative. It was a tenuous victory, but a victory nonetheless. Tarian found Veyara on the observation deck that evening, her posture relaxed for the first time in days. "You did it," he said, joining her at the railing. "We did it," she corrected, her lips curving into a small smile. He chuckled. "Careful, High Sovereign. People might think you're going soft." She turned to him, her expression serious but her eyes warm. "I think I've been soft for a while now. I just didn't realize it until you showed me." Tarian reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "So what now? Do we just go back to our lives and pretend this never happened?" She shook her head. "No, we move forward, together." In the weeks that followed, the alliance between Earth and the Dominion began to take shape. There were challenges, of course, distrust, cultural differences, and the lingering shadows of old wounds. But there was also hope, a fragile but growing belief that two very different species could find common ground. For Tarian and Veyara, the journey was personal as well as political. They were no longer just a human and an alien. They were partners, equals, and something more. One evening, as they stood together on a balcony overlooking Earth's skyline, Veyara leaned against Tarian's shoulder, her voice soft. "You once asked me to choose humanity," she said. He looked down at her, his smile gentle. "And you did." She shook her head, her gaze meeting his. "No, Tarian. I chose you." And in that moment, under the light of 1,000 stars, the High Sovereign of the Dominion and the defiant human rebel found something neither of them had expected: peace.